13 years after Hurricane Katrina, the United States is facing another major challenge. The realities Hurricane Maria left behind in Puerto Rico. Here's what President Trump just said when visiting this is what he said when he visited San Juan in October.
If you look at a real catastrophe like Katrina, and you look at the tremendous hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that died, now what is your death count as of this moment? 17?
16 certified.
16 people certified. 16 people versus in the thousands. You can be very proud of all of your people, all of our people working together. 16 versus literally thousands of people. Everybody around this table and everybody watching can really be very proud of what's taken place in Puerto Rico.
For fact's sake, Puerto Rico was a real catastrophe. The U.S. government should not be proud of what happened before or after Hurricane Maria. Here's shocking new data from a study commissioned by Puerto Rican officials. The report found that Hurricane Maria killed 2,975 Americans. Every demographic was affected by this, but the deaths were especially higher in low-income areas and among the elderly. The new total is more than 46 times the original estimate toll, which after it was 16 was raised to 64. So just how powerful was Hurricane Maria? Well, she made landfall as a massive Category 4 storm. Maria ripped through the island with maximum sustained winds of 155 miles per hour, and it affected nearly 3.4 million people, the total population of Puerto Rico, leaving behind $90 billion in reported damage, the third costliest in U.S. history. Overall, Hurricane Maria was the worst storm to hit the U.S. territory in more than 80 years, making it one of the deadliest natural disasters in U.S. history. All right, joining me now from San Juan is NBC's Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe, let's first of all talk about the conditions in Puerto Rico now. How much improvement have we seen?
Hi there, Alec. Well, things have improved here in Puerto Rico quite a bit. Power has finally been restored to the entire island, although the last customer restored was just a few weeks ago. Many people say that took much too long. We should point out, look, if you go to San Juan, the tourism industry is trying to flourish once again. The economy here in Puerto Rico needs visitors, and the government is trying to lure people back here in order to pump up this area's economy again. But, Ali, as you're mentioning, this new report really seems to confirm what a lot of people here in this island have been telling us for months. Nearly 3,000 people are estimated to have died following Hurricane Maria, making it the deadliest U.S. natural disaster in more than a century. Ali, just think about it, that 3,000 people, more than 1,000 then were killed in Hurricane Katrina. The magnitude of this is overwhelming. We should point out some other things that this report from George Washington University also pointed out. It blamed Puerto Rican officials here on the island for a massive communications breakdown and for not having the proper protocols in place in terms of emergency response. Now, the governor yesterday, Ricardo Rosselló, he said that the official death toll would be updated because of this report. He said that the buck stops with him, and then in hindsight, things could have been done differently. But as you pointed out, the White House still saying that it is proud of the federal effort here, saying that more than 12,000 personnel had come to Puerto Rico. But that statement isn't sitting well with many people here in this island, including San Juan's mayor, Carmen Yulín Cruz, who's been an outspoken critic of the federal government's response. Watch what she had to say right after the White House statement. Take a listen.
Shame on the White House and shame on the president. All he had to say is, I'm sorry that 2,975 of you died. That's all he had to say. But he's incapable of doing that.
Now, we are here in front of Puerto Rico's main morgue. Months ago, the government had brought in extra refrigerated containers in order to be able to hold all the unclaimed bodies here. It's just a staggering death toll. Ali, we've been speaking with so many of the people here on the island and also out in the U.S. mainland who said that they lost close family members in the weeks and the months after the storm. This wasn't a situation where there were so many deaths during the actual storm, structural collapses or drowning during the flooding. This was a slow-moving disaster because power was gone for so long. There was no access to medical care, and that's where many of these deaths happened. And as you mentioned, the at biggest risk were those low-income communities and the elderly. So certainly devastating news here in Puerto Rico, but it's something that many people here expected. Allie.
Gabe, what's the way in which, I mean, they used a series of months after the event to calculate deaths. What's the rationale there, that these are people who otherwise, 2,975 people who otherwise wouldn't have died if that hurricane hadn't been there?
Right, that's 2,975 excess deaths. So to put that in perspective, they looked at from September to February, about 5-6 months or so, around the time of the storm. And remember that Hurricane Irma also grazed Puerto Rico just before Hurricane Maria. But during that time, this study looked at those deaths specifically, and it did something different than other studies hadn't. It also factored in all the people that had left Puerto Rico, tens of thousands of people. And so it took that into account and was able to come up with that number. Beforehand, you had that Harvard study that had a wide-ranging estimate, said it could be as many as 8,000. They zeroed in on 4,600. That was a household survey. This was a survey that the Puerto Rican government had been hanging its hat on. This was highly anticipated for many months. They had refused really to make that death toll higher. They kept it at 64 for so long, and they were waiting on this George Washington University report. It was commissioned by the Puerto Rican government. It cost more than $300,000, and that's why this is so significant. The George Washington University is also asking for more resources to be able to look at these numbers even closer. But the bottom line is the governor of Puerto Rico yesterday, for the first time, acknowledged nearly 3,000 people died as a result of this disaster, the deadliest U.S. natural disaster in more than 100 years. And yes, as you mentioned, more than 60% higher than Hurricane Katrina.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.